So a little while ago, I watched a trailer for a show called X-Men 97, and I thought the trailer was very good. However, I had been so disappointed by Disney Plus shows up to that point that I did a video saying I don't trust Disney with this because I had been disappointed for so long. I thought, there's been so many good trailers that have come out for it in the past. Don't get your hopes up, because I just didn't want to be the fool again and getting my hopes up and being let down. But I was always going to watch it. And then back and forth, up all the way into the premiere. So then I watched the premiere, and I overall loved the show. But people said, just give them till the third episode. Let them let you down, because the third episode is going to let you down. So I got to the third episode of X-Men 97, and I thought it was the best of the entire series. In fact, I am floored by this show. I am floored by it on multiple levels. And you guys, I am an X-Men fan. I became a fan of Marvel through my teen years with the MCU. And from that, I became a fan of the X-Men, but I hadn't really done a deep dive into the X-Men. I'd watched all of the animated shows. I had just some comics, but then this year I went back into it and read so much. I became an expert. And guys, I know X-Men. Allow me to show you. Picked this up today, 275 Jim Lee art, Chris Claremont writing, classic Chris Claremont comics right here. Oh yes, X-Men 2, Jim Lee, Chris Claremont. Got some more Jim Lee here. I got some, sorry about this, but 80s X-Men. I have so much X-Men. This doesn't even scratch the surface. Suffice to say, I am an X-Men expert. So I let's just put that out there. I have so much X-Men. I have a box of X-Men, like the classic stuff, the hard to get stuff over there. I know my X-Men, and this show is absolutely amazing in more levels than one. When I was finished with the third episode, I thought to myself, I think, and I say this, I've thought about it even longer, I think this is the best thing that I've gotten from Marvel since Infinity War. It is that good, and I'm going to explain why. I'm going to talk away some of the flaws that people have said about it, but people keep saying, just wait. It's not, it can't be that good. It can be. It can be that good. This show has single-handedly revived my love for Marvel after so much disappointment, and I'm just so happy with where it's gone. To think that we went from a time when I was wondering if this show would even be watchable, as so many reboots and things have let down, to having this be my favorite thing on right now that I look forward to every week. So this episode is called Fire Made Flesh. This is episode 3, and I wasn't going to do a video about this because I thought, people won't be so interested about me talking about a cartoon week to week, but then I saw other people do it, and I saw that this show is picking up, and it's making new X-Men fans. That is an amazing thing about it, is people who've never been exposed to these characters or this corner of Marvel are watching this show and becoming very interested in it. And so this episode that came out was called Fire Made Flesh, and it adapted a comic storyline that has never been done before, which is what happened with Madeline Pryor, Scott, and Jean. And the comic book version of this storyline was very controversial because it made the very out of character thing to make Scott Summers, Cyclops, leave his wife to be with the actual Jean Grey, and the woman he had married, Madeline Pryor, was revealed to be a clone. And the whole reason why it happened is there was just editorial shenanigans, and they wanted Jean Grey killed, and then they wanted her back to life, and it was just craziness. But that was a horrible storyline in comics, and they changed it in the show in a way that made it work and made that Scott Summers was not guilty of anything like that. In fact, he is guilty. I mean, not guilty, but he is the victim here of Mr. Sinister. What we get with Fire Made Flesh, and I know that there are changes from the comics that we can talk about, but what we get is basically 30 minutes of sort of a tragic tale about this character, and who we find out will be called Madeline Pryor. How she's been living this life as this woman who has these friends and who thinks she has a husband and a son and a family, and she finds out that she was just used as a pawn this entire time. And it's about the characters trying to get through to her as she's used by this man who was her creator, Sinister, who's just so messed up. And she becomes like this really, slay villain. That is not even a word, I'm just going to use it. But she has done the rounds on social media because of just how powerful her character is, how attractive her character is as a villain with their black suit. And she really made the rounds on social media, which I think is funny because one of the things that people were trying to criticize this show about, and I never was, I always thought this was ridiculous, is they were saying that it was going to be bad because Rogue didn't have a butt as big as she did in the original show, which is not true. They were taking one shot and comparing it to a lot of stuff, but I always thought that was ridiculous. My stance on that sort of thing is I don't like characters to be over-sexualized, but I think that there's a difference between being over-sexualized and being attractive. I think there's no problem with characters being attractive, and I thought that this show has stricken the right balance with that so far, as I found Madeline Pryor to be an attractive character, but I never felt like they took it too far. But she made the rounds on social media and is still making the rounds, and it's partially because of that attractiveness to her, but I also think it's because she is a tragic character, and there's, she literally did nothing wrong. People keep saying Madeline Pryor did nothing wrong because she didn't. She was just a pawn in this whole thing, but they just told this storyline of her being this tragic character so quickly and having to give up her son. And I think that that's why people have really latched on to her character and why I saw her action figure just completely sell out. But to see people talking like this about a Marvel show on Disney Plus, I have not seen this kind of enthusiasm for any show since the very first one, WandaVision, and people are invested, people are making jokes, and I just think that that's great, and I love the storyline, and I don't know what people are talking about when they say the animation isn't good. Some of the animation in this episode in particular was just so fluid, and you can slow it down and watch all the details in the fight sequences, and I that was so great. And me feeling like we haven't been getting a lot of great female characters lately, especially from Disney. Wow, we just get a great female villain here and a sympathetic character at that. We just have great female characters in this show. But what I was so impressed by in the show is there was something off about Jean Grey in the show up to this point. But when the real Jean Grey comes back in this episode, you see the difference between her and Madeline Pryor. You see what was off about Madeline Pryor and wanting to leave the X-Men, because I kept saying that would never happen. But Jean Grey, as soon as she wakes up, she takes command in a way, and you feel, oh yes, this is Jean Grey. And it's just that subtlety between these two women in this show that you see that these writers really understand the characters, and they understand even to these tiny details. We get to see Jean Grey's origin for the first time from the comics. In the comics, Jean Grey's telekinesis manifested because her friend was hit by a car and she felt her last thoughts as she died, and that was trauma. And this is why X-Men comics are so good, is that there is that emotional depth and that thought going into them, and that is what is going into the show as they adapt these storylines. It isn't just Easter eggs. That was one of my fears about the show. I was worried, is it going to be just Easter eggs? And it's not. It's actually being thoughtful as it's weaving these story points together, and knowledge about Scott Summers being abandoned as a child, not wanting to do that to his son, but how that sets up Cable and how he's a character from the future, and just sort of tying up all those plot points. And yes, you do need to have knowledge of the original show and some of the plot lines in order to get it, but I just think that they do such a good job in understanding all of these individual characters. What I want to talk about, another character that they really, I think, are doing a great job with on the show, is Gambit. Now, Gambit is one of my favorite comic book characters of all time, and he's a very underrated character. He's a character that a lot of people do not understand. But they're doing that. He was barely used in the movies. He was 5 minutes in X-Men Origins Wolverine, has barely appeared in the cartoon series since the 90s. They haven't developed him in like 20 years apart from the comics, but this show understands him so well, even in just the little bits we get in episode 3. Now, from the first 2 episodes, I hated the Rogue Magneto stuff. I've hated it in the comics, I hate it in the show. However, I started feeling a bit better about it when I was seeing what they were doing with it, because Gambit in the comics, the whole suave ladies man persona is just an act. He actually is filled with a lot of self-hatred, a lot of insecurity, and he doesn't feel like he can ever redeem himself because of what he's done in the past, and Rogue is definitely his soft spot and his weakness. So in this episode, you see him, being really cocky in front of Morph, and then as soon as Morph tries to tease him about what might potentially be going on with Rogue and Magneto, that facade comes down and he starts panicking, and you get that in his dream. And it seems that this is really setting up what is a big storyline in the comics about the trial of Gambit and how he was involved, sort of unwittingly involved in getting a lot of mutants killed in the Mutant Massacre storyline. And that is one of my favorite storylines for the character ever. One of my favorite storylines to read about with Rogue and Gambit. And it looks like they're going that way in episode 5. And I'm so excited about that because it's like, here is a character who's kind of been left in the dumps for so many years, and you're bringing him back, and you're doing things interesting with him, and you're developing him, and you're seeing the depth and the layers to the character. And so that's just what has me so excited about this show. Now, for criticisms of the show, now Rogue is my favorite character in X-Men. Has she been done well in the show? I would say not so far. It's the kind of thing that could get better or worse, depending on the context. Once again, Magneto and Rogue stuff, always bad in the comics. I've said that a million times, so I don't need to say it again. But the problem is that, you know, after being such a strong character in so many animated adaptations up to this point, now it feels like she hasn't done anything in this show other than be in a forced relationship with Magneto. Not really a relationship, but just bringing back this idea that she had a thing with him, whatever that was in the past, and that's kind of forced, and give Gambit some heartache. So she herself just hasn't done much. Once again, that could be better with more context and to see where they go with it, better or worse. And that's, I think, one of the criticisms you could have with the show is that the cast is so massive. Bishop, for example, never cared for his character, but I can admit he wasn't given much. I even forgot he was in the show. It's hard to juggle so many characters at once. Maybe where they're just waiting to get around to other characters first. And the other criticism that's been levied against this show is that it's way too fast-paced. Now, I understand what people mean by this, and yes, they did change things for this storyline from the comics to condense it into a 30-minute episode. I understand that criticism because I'm thinking, you know, what if they took Dark Phoenix, for example, which is one of the best episodes of the original series, and condensed it into one episode? That wouldn't be great. Are we deprived of an even better storyline just because they're going so quickly with it? But while I can agree that that is a legitimate criticism, here's why I don't personally share it. One of my biggest problems with Disney Plus shows is it felt like they would never get anywhere, that it would drag out with filler episodes, that characters would literally just pause, make multiple unnecessary pauses in their sentence just to slow things down because the writers and the directors would be given a quota of content to fill that they couldn't fill. But this show, to be fast-paced, to watch an episode and just get so much from it, it's just so refreshing to me. And you know, I feel a little bit vindicated, and we'll see where the show goes next. You know, maybe there will be things that I personally won't be very happy with. Maybe there'll be certain episodes that are stronger or weaker than others. But I'm kind of done doubting this show. I have put a lot of trust in the people working on this because they really care about the source material. Like, even going back to the MCU at one point just sort of stopped really caring about the source material and started doing its own thing. This cares about adapting these comics. These are from people who understand these stories. You know, you see AJ Lacasa and Lenore Zan having a lot of fun with this Magneto Rogue Gambit love triangle, all the memes online. They're having fun with the fans and their investment in these stories and their concerns about these stories. And that's just such a great thing to be a part of. And I feel vindicated because early this year I did a video talking about could the X-Men save the MCU. I picked the perfect time to get back into the X-Men, by the way. And I said I think the X-Men could be more popular than the Avengers. I still stand by that. But just as this show is still just this little show that I'm gradually seeing pick up more people, I see it here. And I'm like, this is the way forward, because what's different about the X-Men from the Avengers, you see the differences, and people, you know, saying that the Avengers got stale, that the movies were all the same. The X-Men have different elements to it. They have a strong melodramatic element. They have a lot of crazy things happen. You have it in this episode, you know, a guy finds out that his wife was actually a clone. You have love triangles. You have all that stuff going on. That's the soap opera element of the X-Men that gives it its edge and sets it apart completely from the Avengers. So it could be, it gives you, it opens the doors to do crazier things, and it would be very different than the Avengers, but what would really make it work is how strong the characters and character dynamics are, and these very emotional storylines, and that's why these characters just have so much potential. Now, I have some theories going forward. My main theory is just basically with, apart from doing the Gambit trial of Gambit storyline, it's possible that maybe this stuff with Rogue and Magneto is a misdirect, because it's kind of got the story beats of a misdirect where they're laying it on really thick that something's going on, but something doesn't seem quite right. as Rogue still fusses over Gambit all this time. So it's possible that when she's off with Magneto, he's just teaching her to learn to control her powers. Because really, all she would need to do, if we are accepting that he can touch her with his powers in the show, all she would need to do is steal his powers permanently, like she did with Carol Danvers, and then she could touch whoever. But that's my one theory about what might be happening going forward, and we'll see if it holds any water in the next episode. I did see some people getting scared, though, like Rogue and Gambit aren't gonna get together or something. They're going to. Like, one of my favorite parts in episode 3 is the opening when they showed a reference to X-Men 4, one of my favorite comics ever written that I own, by the way, and it's the scene of them in the basketball, but with a twist where she does the little hand over a face kiss because that's all she can do. Whenever they do the Magneto Rogue thing in comics, it always ends up with Gambit. That's not my problem. My problem is that I don't like Magneto and Rogue in the first place. But, that's clearly where they're going, and it does speak to some of the understanding of her character again, which they've talked about in interviews, that Rogue runs from Gambit because she cares about him so much and she doesn't want him to get hurt. So I think that's going to come into play. I just want to see how they do it and if they do it right. But I'm just so happy to have a show that I really enjoy and just can love these characters again and be excited about other people finding these characters. My dad recently read a Chris Claremont X-Men comic because he wanted to read Life Death, which is a storyline that they're adapting in this show. So I would not sleep on this if you are at all a fan of sci-fi, if you are at all a fan of the X-Men. I would not recommend this show for kids to watch alone. I would say parents should watch it first and decide if their kids can handle it. And because they know who their audience is for this show. They made it for people who grew up or have watched X-Men 92, and those are mostly adults. I mean, they're all adults now. So the show has things like, Scott Summers found out that the wife he's been living with all these years isn't his wife, but a clone of his wife. And Gambit's fears about what's going on with Rogue and Magneto turn a little suggestive. I know it's a comic book reference, but it's a bit suggestive. There's stuff like that in there. So this is more of it's like an adult cartoon, but there's still pretty tasteful about it. Like, it's not gratuitous. It's just where you might not want kids to watch it. So that's where this show is for. But I would, it is just such a good show so far, and I look forward to the next episode, and I hope that it keeps up this level of quality, but I'm just so excited to have something this good come out. And once again, just to have my low expectations be turned out wrong and to have something actual good. But that is all I got for you guys today. I can't wait to talk about this show even more and lots more content coming out in the future. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Thank you, patrons, as always. I have a short film coming out very soon that I can't wait for you guys to see my own work, as I'm going to be pushing myself to do fiction more and more, which is what I really want to do. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.